I'm Biresh Banerjee. Welcome to DW News Asia. Glad you could join us. Ethnic violence in an Indian state has displaced more than 35,000 people in the past month. At least 70 people have also been killed so far. The government has resorted to enforcing local curfews and shutting down the internet. We're talking of Manipur in India's northeast, where long-standing distrust between two communities has spilled over into violence. The majority Meitei community and the minority Kuki community. In a moment, we'll be looking at one area, Churachandpur, which has witnessed violence. But the trigger for it was an indication that the majority Meitei community could be recognized by the government for special benefits under India's affirmative action policies. The minority Kukis have always felt discriminated against when it comes to government jobs and other benefits, and this fresh talk of possibly extra advantages to the Meiteis sparked a reaction. The result? Homes burned down, people murdered, and lives permanently changed.
This family had just arrived at the school-turned relief camp near the town Churachandpur in Manipur. B.T. Luna, his wife and 3 children fled their village after it was attacked by a mob. Luna, a former soldier, belongs to the Kuki minority tribe. Like many of his fellow tribesmen, his home was in an area largely dominated by the majority Meitei community. But that all changed when his village was burnt to ashes in the 3rd week of May.
I miss my home. My heart belongs there. I had built my house from scratch with all my earnings. It is not only my home that has been burned, but my heart also. I am like a living corpse now, sitting without life.
Outside the relief camps, military personnel filled the streets. The security forces were deployed after violent clashes broke out between members of the Kuki tribe, mostly Christians, and the Hindu majority Meitei community. Tensions erupted between the two groups over economic benefits and quotas reserved for the tribal Kuki in government jobs. This jeep was just set on fire by angry protesters. For the past few weeks, houses and vehicles have been torched on both sides. Nearby hospitals like this one have become scenes of chaos. Man Hadzao, a senior surgeon, struggles with the load of incoming patients. Today, he is checking on Zampao, a Kuki who has 2 bullets in his bag.
I have never experienced this kind of, chaotic situation where people like 20 to 30 bullet injuries will come in, in 1-2 minutes. Within 2-3 minutes, people just started pouring inside the casualty, and it was quite challenging, I must say.
Other wards are full of new patients. Away from the tribal areas, to Imphal, the capital of Manipur, which has emerged as a focal point of resistance by the Meitei community. Young and old have been gathering here every day to protest against the Kukis. In the Veer Saikomcha, Meitei leader briefs his men on the latest protest strategies. The Meitei say they are forced to block roads and torch vehicles to get their voices heard. Their anguish mirrors that of their Kuki rivals.
This fear that our houses, our home will be burned and we will have no place to return the next day, it's a nightmare for us. And there's a burning down of our Meitei villages still continue till today.
Back at the relief camp, like Luna, there are thousands of other displaced people from both communities. For now, there appears to be no end to the ethnic violence. An uncertain future awaits the Kuki and Meitei communities.
Let's get more context on this from Professor Kishle Bhattacharjee, Dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. He's also an author and a former journalist who's reported extensively from India's northeastern states. Professor Bhattacharjee, the Kuki and the Meitei communities have lived in Manipur for generations. Why then is there such distrust between them?
It's a little complicated to really explain this briefly, but if I make an attempt, the Meiteis are the majority community in Manipur, which is a bordering state of India in the northeast. It borders Myanmar. Manipur was an independent sovereign kingdom before it joined India. And the Kukis, along with various other tribes, are also part of that land in Manipur. And where the majority population actually occupies a very small part of the land, which is almost 10% of the total land, is where the bulk of the population and the Meiteis reside. And the hills around are populated or very sparsely populated with various tribes. There are more than a dozen tribes out there. And the more dominant of those tribes are some tribes like the Tangkuls, who also call themselves Nagas. And then you have the Kukis. And in India, as in many other parts of the world, and in Manipur too, there has always been levels of mistrust, distrust between communities. So ethnic strife is not something new. In fact, the Tangkul Nagas once actually carried out almost a genocidal killing of the Kukis. The Kukis live in certain parts of the area of the district, not just concentrated in one. But recently, I think the fissure really happened because of the Meitei demand of becoming scheduled tribe. Now in India, you have scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, and the non-scheduled ones. So the Meiteis were non-scheduled plains people. They had the option of choosing that at the point in time of independence, which they didn't. And now they're demanding that to be able to access areas beyond that 10%. And the Kukis and other tribals who are in those areas in the hills feel that their livelihood and land is going to be threatened. So in a sense, at the heart of this trouble is the fight over land and livelihood.
Now, you have more than 35,000 people who've essentially been uprooted in their own state and forced to either move to refugee camps or to areas where people from their community live. I'm wondering if you think this physical separation between these communities is now permanent.
What I have heard this morning, which was very disturbing to me, I spoke to my former crew members with whom I have worked in Manipur over many years. And this kind of strife is not new to Manipur, though in recent years, I would say that there was palpable sense of some amount of peace within, inverted commas, really. But we hadn't seen this level of violence. But when I spoke to them, they said that this is the worst they've ever seen. So yes, this separation may not be permanent, but this separation, it's going to take a long time for things to heal, for some levels of trust to come. But the geostrategic situation of Manipur right now has also changed because of this palpable peace. A lot of battalions of the paramilitary force and the army were moved to the Chinese border, allowing for gaps within the Indo-Myanmar border out there. With the Myanmar junta, and the situation in Myanmar, volatile situation in Myanmar going on for a couple of years since the pandemic, one of the valley-based groups, the PLA, at least have formed an alliance with the Myanmarese junta, and the PLA has allied with one of the Naga groups, and there's something called insurgent opportunism. So I think a lot of these valley-based and hill-based armed militia, which were not active, which were lying low for some time, have suddenly again come back to being active, not just for the ethnic strife, but actually they have now access to the Golden Triangle. There is a new drug route, which was already there, but it's much more active now. And I think if an area remains unstable, the classic situation is that all kinds of underworld trade then flourishes. So it's far more complicated, like I said in the beginning, than just a simple ethnic strife.
Right. Which brings me to the most obvious question, therefore, given everything that you've described and the relative periods of peace, in inverted commas, as you described it, can durable peace at all be achieved between these communities, given that they don't trust each other? And as people on the ground have been telling you, it's the worst violence they've ever seen.
I think given the size of the place, which is not very big, given the size of the population, which is also not very big, and I'm speaking in relative terms with the rest of India, the first things is that the government of the day must be held accountable, and the government should be holding others accountable who are responsible for this. I mean, it is a very highly militarized zone, but how is the mob running the government right now? Obviously, the government was in absentia. So there was in various parts of the region, the underground groups, as they like to call themselves, the armed militia, or ran a parallel government. Things were changing, or perhaps that was a perception that people were having because there was a general fatigue amongst the armed militia. But if the government not going to perform its normal function of governance, then you are just keeping options open for the armed groups and other groups to really control power, and that's exactly what's happening. So I suppose that there's no semblance of government and accountability, and that needs to be set in place first. And I think the rest is not so difficult to achieve.
We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us today. Kishle Bhattacharjee, Dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. Thank you so much.